AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host, Mark Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Welcome to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly. Today's guest is Nachi Junankar. Nachi is the CEO and founder of Avrio. Nachi, very welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to your listeners for taking the time.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what had you inspired to actually set up Avrio?
Yeah, a bit of my background. I started and built my first company out of college, and it was called Livewire, and we were a CRM company. And I was just a little kid, and I didn't really know a lot about building companies, but I learned fast, and I had a great team with me, so that was helpful. And from 2 to 100 employees in about 3 years, so it was a pretty quick growth. And after that, I built a couple of companies. The last one was a company called Open Mobile. We built a pretty seminal technology that allows any Android application on a non-Android system. And with Avrio, what was really interesting, the main premise of the business was and is to really help people use their own data for their own benefit. And what we found was that people and companies really, there are a lot of business models out there that data and you get questionable benefit. There aren't a lot of business models where you get to benefit from your own data. So in this case, we saw companies were using less than 5% of their corporate HR and recruitment CRM, as well as other corporate data. And people weren't able to use their data for their own benefit either. And we saw these incredible inefficiencies in the job market on both sides, where people were not getting the jobs that they needed and at the right place, at the right time, and companies weren't getting the right people at the right time that they needed to build and grow their businesses. This is an extraordinarily painful situation for both parties, and it's global. There's no company in the world that does not have this problem, and it hurts every single entity. It hurts businesses, it hurts people. And if you look sort of beyond the headlines of unemployment rates and such, it's still a very difficult proposition to find the right person as well as to find the right job. And so if you think about the individual job seeker, they're sort of living in this opaque world, right? And they're not able to understand, they don't have the tools to understand, how to improve their game, how to match to the right job, why they're not getting a call back for a particular job. Are they supposed to learn some skills? Are they, basically how do they improve their game, right? And on the company side, it's sort of the same problem, which is like, although they have more data and more control, really match up the right people to the right jobs at the right time. And so we set out to build a platform that is quite challenging for a variety of reasons. But the main reason is we set ourselves up for a pretty difficult task of building a general purpose hiring platform. Now, if you look at the other AI or even so-called AI platforms out there, and I say that because there's different degrees of sophistication and in AI, and some of it is questionable if it is even AI.
Example of that would be like if-then rules, right? So if-then, and then it can kind of be a very squiggly mess depending on all the different if-thens. So when we think of machine learning, it's kind of training, or has it seen it before? So it's been able, and also kind of make sure that it can kind of infer and make different decisions based on the training data. Is that what you mean by that?
That's exactly right. I mean, there are a lot of rule-based sort of systems out there, as you're, hinting at, that, mask themselves as AI systems, but there's no machine learning component. And they're also not able to, improve the system in any significant way without just pure manual, work. And that's not what companies should be signing up for, because that's not where you get the most bang for your buck. So, for example, to highlight that point, I would talk at the headquarters of Converse, which is a shoe company, and there were about 40 heads of talent, Fortune companies at that meeting, and one of the analysts that happened to be presenting said that, hey, don't worry about whether these vendors or these companies have machine learning or not. I just worry about the features you want. And I, raised my hand and I said, actually, that's sort of misleading, because if company X has machine learning core to their offering, and company Y doesn't, the customer that is working with company X is definitely going to have a much more significant benefit in the short and long run than company Y, because company Y's system is not really learning from all the interaction and all the data, old and new, that's in the system. So it's there's a lot of questionable information out there, and I think that your listeners would be smart to pay attention to the team, for example, at a particular company, to the degree of sophistication in their understanding, writing about or speaking about AI.
Yeah.
So there's good stuff out there, but it's hard to discern from the not so good stuff.
Yeah, you have to be kind of careful of that kind of red shiny button and those kind of salesmen who are actually selling you a dream, whether you haven't got your data ready or fit for purpose, or it's actually just if-then rules. So tell me about how you actually overcame some of those challenges, and then some of the benefits that Avrio has brought to some of its customers.
Yeah, I mean, in building the general purpose platform, what we set out to do was really look at the market, and we think of the market as as a triangle, let's say, and the top of the triangle, it's an equilateral triangle. The top of the triangle, let's say the tip of the triangle, you've got the 2 or 3% of the market, which is the executive search firms, and a lot of that hiring happens through networking. Yeah. Although there are some interesting things we can do there, in terms of saving them, bringing them significant efficiencies. That's a small percentage of the market. If you look at the base of the triangle, there's about 20 or 30% of the market is going to be the low skilled type hiring, and vast majority of the companies in this domain, if not all of them, are really focused on that type of hiring, because honestly, that's simpler and it's less sophisticated to from a technology deployment standpoint. Because when you're hiring a worker at Amazon, you're really focused on whether they can lift 50 pounds, whether they have a forklift operator license, whether they have a good record, and whether they can show up at work tomorrow at 10 a.m. And work for $11 an hour. And so that kind of a conversation, if you will, does not require a lot of AI or a lot of sophistication. Whereas what we're focused on is the middle, which is the heart of the market. 60 to 70% of hiring in the world happens in the middle. And that's more complex because you have to match and converse with various types of people in various industries, in various geographies, and in the future in various languages, as well as various domains. a administrative assistant working for a hedge fund is a very different person than an administrative assistant working at a hospital. And so that requires a significant amount of and a lot of data. So, we've looked at, we have millions and millions of resumes and, candidates data, and we have millions and millions of jobs and, company data. And we use this data to really, analyze and machine the match. And so the way the product works is really, it's got three core components. It's got the analyzer, the matcher, and the chatter. We take data from companies, large staffing firms, as well as large recruitment teams at corporations, through their applicant tracking system and their recruitment CRM. We develop a deep understanding of this data, and we reason about the candidacy. We reason about what this job is looking for, difference between a nice to have and a must have. For example, basic qualifications, whether travel is required for this job, and of course in detail what the candidacy has to offer. Then we run this data through the matcher, and the matcher is a bunch of ML algorithms that start determining, out of these, 5 million people we're looking at, who are the top, 50 people for each job, for example. The matcher then develops a unique scorecard for every candidate vis-a-vis every job. So you can do the math. We're looking at, 1 million candidates vis-a-vis 1,000 jobs. That's a lot of matches and a lot of scorecards. And then we send this data off to the chatter, where the chatter reaches out to candidates that score above a certain threshold, let's say 50 or 60 or 70, a customer sets that, and then converses about, a variety of things, such as, your availability, your expectations from this job, including salary expectations, your travel preferences, your skills, whether you've led teams or not. So depending on the type of, job and the type of candidate that they're matched to, we can have a pretty detailed and reasonably smart conversation with the individual. And once this process is completed, we would then rescore the candidate and say, hey Mark, after the conversation, you ended up with a score of 85, which is a great score, and we're working on some features such as a scheduler that'll automatically schedule people, for the next sort of face-to-face interview. But once this conversation is done, we rescore them. We also transcribe the conversation for both parties, so there's full transparency in how questions were asked and answered. So there's a very significant chunk of the work that we do on behalf of the recruiter, and this goes to our one of our core philosophies, which is let the humans do what they're best at and let machines do what they're good at. And humans are really good at relationships, and in this recruitment context, really shepherding the candidate through the process. Whereas machines are really good at looking at large scale data and figuring out, who's the right kind of person for this kind of a job.
Yeah, which really makes for a consistent process, Nachi, which is fantastic. Where do you think the market's going in the next kind of year to 2 years? It's probably a very difficult question to answer. Over 3 to 5 years, the next year to 18 months then?
That's a really good question. And, our vision really is to be able to do this in a predictive way. So today we're doing this, in the present based on historical data. But what we really want to do is we see these, entities moving in space and time. You see people moving on a particular track that have probabilities attached to it. And then you see companies and their jobs moving on a particular track that also have probabilities attached to it. And what we want to do is we want to be able to say, hey, company X, you're going to be hiring 10,000 people in the next 12 months. We've already talked to, 5 million people, and here are the people that you'd be able to hire in the coming, year. So to be predictive about these things rather than reactive about it, would be a big shift. It also allows people to prepare for these transitions better, plan ahead, rather than this sort of running around like crazy in sort of a job search process. It also takes sort of the panic out of the company in the sense that now they know where the quality of the candidates that they're going to get, and they can do something about it. So, for example, if they find that that the quality of the candidate pool in a particular area is not strong, they can perhaps invest more in doing events to recruit such people, or do more marketing around that kind of a hire. So there are actions that they can take once they have this predictive information, which they currently are fully reactive. So that's what we're trying to get to, and we want to be the preeminent platform that does that.
Yeah, that's truly going to be the game changer, is when you're kind of that far ahead rather than kind of looking back at past data and history. It's just going to make a really big difference to that customer experience, both candidate and client.
We hope so.
Yeah, you were saying the future then?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about where the market is going to be in the next 3 years, as you asked, it really, we tend to underestimate the impact of these technologies in the long term and overestimate it in the short term. And I think that trend will continue, which is, I find that our customers, when we first start talking to them, they're a little bit wary of, our promises, because, companies promise the world, and many times come short and fall short. But what we try to do is educate them about, how this thing would work, and why this thing would be successful, what we do with their data, and how we protect the privacy, and how we have good policy around how we use your data. And most of the time, companies understand that there is a bit of a learning curve for us as well as them and their users. But once they're past the learning curve and the transition, they learn to trust the system. And the game really is about trust, because if I'm a recruiter or a hiring manager or a head of recruitment, that Avrio is giving me the right scoring candidates, that there's no funny stuff going on where they're, ranking a particular candidate high or low for some, unknown reason. And this is why we always harp on the transparency of the process, because this is why we generate the scorecard, and this is why we transcribe the chat on both sides, to show you that, these are trusted sort of conversations. And over time, what happens is, what we see happening is, people do start trusting the scores. We don't expect recruiters all over the world to just say, fine, if Avrio says it's an 85, we should just hire this person, because we do want them to bring the human element to the table, and build those relationships and make sure that this person is a good fit, in many other ways, and not just based on our system.
Yeah.
So it's really about continuing to build that trust for us.
Which is really, really important. You're listening to Nachi Junankar. Nachi is the CEO and founder of Avrio. And Nachi, that was my last question today. Thank you very much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups, Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.